Great. So my second speech today is about cycling in the city of Bristol. So as some of you may know, I know some of you in this room, I live currently in Bristol and I have done since, well, on and off since 2011 when I moved here to go to university. It's a lovely place. I love it here. And yeah, hopefully some of you after this speech will come and visit. Bristol is located in the southwest of England, so it's not far from Wales. You can get to Wales in 15 minutes. It has a population of around 440,000 people as of 2011, so that was the last census. It's the sixth most populous city in England and the 8th most populous city in the UK as a whole. In 2015, Bristol was made the European Green Capital by the European Commission, who was completely impressed by its transportation and energy plans, particularly its plans involving renewable energy and sort of biofuels on its buses and things like that. And they were awarded a lot of investment funding for this kind of green transportation initiative. And coincidentally, in 2015, that same year, that was the year that I started cycling in Bristol. It was the year that I graduated from university. I got my first job, which was quite far away from my house, and I had to cycle because I couldn't afford a car at that time. I was fresh out of uni. I didn't have any money, and the buses in the centre of Bristol are good, but the buses sort of the outskirts are not good at all. So the buses to this tiny industrial estate that I was working on were no good, basically. So I had to borrow my dad's old bike, and away I went. So at first, it was a real struggle. Now, I've heard some people complaining about the hills in Brussels. I laugh at those people. Those people don't know how good they have it. Bristol is extremely hilly. My route to Avonmouth, as it's called, was 5 miles of constant hills and 5 miles back of constant hills. So initially, as the kind of unfit couch potato, I really struggled, but soon afterwards I started to love it. So the job that I was doing then was kind of customer service, lots of angry Germans shouting at me. So I loved that time to unwind on my bike at the end of the day, that half hour with just the wind in my hair, completely unwinding from all the stresses. And that might have been because I had a really lovely cycling route. It was very green, some beautiful kind of parks. I was all in these suburban, beautiful residential areas, and that made it a real pleasure to cycle to work. But unfortunately, my boyfriend has a much worse experience cycling. Obviously, at the moment, he's working from home, but before he would cycle almost an hour each way along awful uphill roads covered in broken glass. People speeding, 2 lanes of traffic each way, really stressful. So I consider myself lucky that I had a good experience. And my good experiences aren't unique in Bristol. There are loads of amazing cycle paths, cycle routes that you can go on just for fun. One particular example is the Bristol to Bath cycle path. So that's a 13-mile railway path that's lovely and flat, unlike most of Bristol. And that will take you right from the heart of Bristol to the heart of Bath. So you can cycle that whole way, spend a lovely day in Bath, and then come back by train if you're too tired to cycle back. But it's not all sunshine and rainbows in the world of cycling in Bristol. Unfortunately, there are some frustrations of the cycling scene in Bristol that I'd like to just kind of quickly touch on. So first of all, cycle lanes are a real problem. They go from one part of road where you've got loads of space, you're right far away from the cars, and then suddenly the cycle lane disappears and you're merging with traffic that's going twice your speed, and it's really stressful. Or sometimes the cycle lane will completely swap to the other side of the road, and there's no way of getting across apart from just kind of going headlong into cars, which is not ideal. And that leads me on to the second issue that I have with cycling in Bristol, which is the behaviour of certain drivers. And that involves me being knocked off my bike quite a few times. Thankfully, I've never broken any bones, but I have had some pretty impressive bruises in the past. And I've noticed actually recently, since we've been on lockdown here, we're allowed to go out on bikes or go running for exercise. And I have been out on my bike a few times. And I've noticed that the people are taking advantage of the empty roads. They are tearing along at double the speed limit, overtaking this close to any bikes. It's quite terrifying. And my third issue with cycling in Bristol also has to do with cycle lanes slightly. But this one was kind of a well-intentioned initiative by the Bristol Council. They decided, we're going to create a whole pedestrianised zone in the centre of Bristol. We're going to have some lovely cycle lanes that go within that zone, so bikes are really safe. But it's just not the case. The cycle lanes that they've built are very difficult to see. They're the same colour as the pavement. There's only a tiny little sign on the floor that's the same colour as the cycle lane itself. So it's actually very difficult to see which part is the cycle lane. You have pedestrians immediately walking directly in front of your bike, or as a pedestrian, sometimes you have a bike tearing straight towards you. It's not very safe area. But despite all of these problems, Bristol is an extremely popular place for cyclists. There's maybe not quite so many as somewhere like Amsterdam or Copenhagen, but there is still quite a few cyclists here in the city. And this is kind of manifested in several community projects that have kind of sprung up around the city. And one of these community projects relating to cycling is called the Bristol Bike Project. Now, this was set up in 2008, and it was initially created by two friends who had just come back from kind of cycle touring abroad. And they decided they wanted to do something to address a problem that they saw in the city, which was the fact that there were quite a few asylum seekers in the city who didn't have access to good transportation. They didn't have access to the public transport. It was just too expensive. They couldn't buy cars. They were struggling to get around. So they decided they would set up this initiative to get people to donate their old bikes. They would refurbish them and give them away to people in need. And they kind of spread out from this one aim of helping asylum seekers to helping a whole range of people. So they help people with mental health issues. They help people in kind of sheltered or vulnerable housing. They help people who are recovering from substance addiction. And they also help people by training them up in bike maintenance. So giving them a purpose, giving them something to do, whether it's as a job or as a volunteer. So this is a really wonderful example of a project relating to cycling that has been launched in Bristol. So I hope I've given you a bit of an oversight into how cycling has impacted the city of Bristol and why I love it so much. And yeah, I hope you will come and visit my wonderful city someday. Thank you.